Okay, so the problem that I have as speaker, and a problem that a lot of we speakers have now, is the fact that you are connected to the internet, which means that you've seen a whole lot of inspiration, a whole lot of information, a whole lot of all these things. So in order to avoid the risk of sounding like something you've heard before, what I want to do is tell you something that almost nobody knows or couldn't know unless they're in my experience. Yesterday at 3:47, I was sitting in my full-time job, and I still have a full-time job, where I'm an e-learning designer for a company called Trust. We make a lot of multimedia and stuff like that. So one of my coworkers gets a call at 3:47 p.m. And I can tell it's a good call because she gets this smile on her face. She's like, well, right, like that call, so you know something's going down. And I hear, oh, that's so great to hear. That's so amazing. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. And then she keeps asking questions like, well, when does that go into effect? And what's the monetary aspect of that? And she finishes the conversation with, well, I guess you'll have to take us all to dinner. Which is always good news, right? She's getting a free dinner. What I find out is that on the other line of that phone was her son. Her son's name is Joe. Joe, like so many of us, went to college for a degree which he discovered he was not that crazy about. And I could tell that a lot of us have had at least that moment in our lives where we're like, really? Like, is this the thing? And so Joe got a degree in finance. Joe's very good at finance, as it turns out. So he lands the job. He's doing the kind of thing that he thought he wanted to do all along, only to find out that it's not really the thing he wanted to do all along. And so what Joe does is something that not a lot of people do. Joe takes the steps to figure out something that he is excited about. Right? And Joe accidentally stumbles into this thing that a coworker of his is involved in, a language called SQL. It's a programming language. And Joe finds that this is very appealing. He loves SQL. Now, I know what SQL is, and I don't love SQL. So that should tell you something about Joe right there, right? And so what Joe does instead is Joe dives into the language, and he learns SQL in his free time. And he takes time after work to stay and talk with this guy about SQL and everything it can do and everything that it is and what other companies are doing with it. See, what's interesting about Joe is that instead of resigning himself to a life of finance, or instead of trying to go into the world and do his own thing, here's what I like about Joe's story specifically. He started where he was, and he looked at the people around him. And that sounds really good, but I want to make sure that we all like really get what happens there, because I think we get lost in this age of the internet because the problem with the internet is that you have to be the best. When you're a web designer on the internet, what on earth would make me come to you and pay you $150 an hour when I can get Zaffer from India do mine for $8? Right? That's a problem. And so what Joe did instead, and he's not conscious of all of this maybe, but what he did was he started locally, and he looked at a need that he could fill locally. And so Joe continues to learn SQL, continues to build things, continues to grow. And what happens is, you guys know the end of the story, right? Good news. Joe spent 2 to 3 weeks of his time, of his free time, of time that he was not paid for a company that he just happened to be at, right? Like he wasn't like getting out of college and like, ooh, I can't wait for work for company X. He was like, oh, I think I want to do finance, and this person's hiring, and so I got to pay the bills, and that's where he ends up. And so instead, he takes his free time, he builds something in SQL, and he builds them a database using the information that he already has. He has no idea how it's going to turn out. He walks into this guy's office, he says, hey, I built you this thing, do you want to take a look at it? And the guy said, you made this? He said, yeah. He said, huh. Nothing more, right? So Joe goes out of the room. He was like, well, at least I learned something. The next day, Joe becomes manager of databases instantly. And the day after that, Joe gets a huge pay increase, and all of a sudden, he has a new position, he has a new boss, and he's making a lot more money than he did before. What I think is interesting about creativity is a lot of time we get stuck. We get stuck thinking we have to do our thing for everybody else in the world, or else it's not worth doing. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of us end up in a position where we're not even able to climb that ladder yet. We're not even able to reach the top echelon because we don't have the opportunity, we don't have the network, we don't have the connections, we might not even have the talent yet. One of the things that I recommend a lot when I write and when I speak other places is I always recommend talking to your coworkers over reading the latest New York Times bestseller list, because they have information that directly applies to what you're doing every day. They have no reason to keep you on the hook because they're not selling you anything. They're there for follow-up questions, and you can talk to them whenever you want. They have a wealth of knowledge, most of these people that are right around you. We're all looking for the guru up here when there might be one right next door, right? So Joe's story is important to me, not necessarily because he's the traditional creative. This is a logic guy. He falls in love with SQL. Who falls in love with SQL? Right? Joe did. Joe found a way to make it work, and he found a way to create something new in a place that there wasn't before. And there was one big element of this that's important for Joe, and it's important for any creative trying to make something new in the world. Does anybody throw me out what you think it is? What did Joe have that separated him from someone else that didn't do what Joe did?
Initiative?
Passion, initiative, close.
Dedication.
Dedication, definitely had some dedication. I'm looking for something specific. What else did Joe have? Self-direction, initiation, self-learning. We talked about this, right?
Time.
Time, initiative. We're all around it. Execution, definitely important. But even more than that, Joe had all these things. He had initiative, he self-learned, he executed, he found the people near him, he found a need. But more than that, Joe had faith. He didn't know. He didn't know that he would be promoted. He didn't know he would make more monies. He didn't know that the very next day he would walk into a completely different reality. But what he did is he took an interest and he followed that path, right? He followed something that he thought, hey, this might be an interesting thing for me. Passion is a big thing, right? And I heard somebody shout that out earlier. But the thing about passion is you don't really, I hate this expression, find your passion. Because you don't find your passion, you build it. You pick passion. And you don't just sit there and say, ooh, what should I do? Because then the problem is you run into the case where you're copying someone else because that's all you see. But when you create this mindset of, oh, I'm going to build my passion, that's when you start to spot new opportunities because you're not following someone else's path, you're following your own. And so the hierarchy goes like this. It's not look, see, find. It's interest. You see something that interests you. Activity, usually a lot. And then passion. I would honestly make the case that I don't even know if Joe does have passion for SQL right now. He hasn't been doing it that long. But he sure as heck has an interest, and he sure as heck has taken a lot of activity. And what you find at that passion level, honestly, more often than not, is you got into a place where it's like, well, I put too much in it to quit now. Right? And so sometimes passion is all-consuming. Sometimes you build it from the very start. I had a friend this is one of those conversations that I replay over and over in my head and laugh. We were talking about careers and we were talking about passions, and this is one of those guys that's just super buttoned up. Picture, how many of you have seen Frasier, the television show? Raise your hands, please. Okay, so everybody, how many? Niles Crane. This is who this guy is. He's a modern day Niles Crane, and so I'm talking to the guy and I say, man, it must be so nice. He's a chemical engineer. I'm like, it must be so nice to have always known what you were going to do. He's one of these traditional students, right? He went to Georgia Tech engineer school, got through his master's degree in 6, never stopped going to school, graduated and became an engineer. Bam, that was it. And he gives no indication, like so many of us, that he wants to be anywhere else. It's like the man was born to be a chemical engineer. And so I'm talking to him, and I say, that must be nice to have always known you were going to be a creative engineer. And he says, oh man, it wasn't that way at all. And I'm like, thank God. I'm like, thank God. And I was like, so tell me, like, what else did you want to do? He was like, man, when I started college, I felt like it could have been any discipline of engineering. And I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me, because, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, I was going to be a golfer, then I was going to be a musician, then I was going to do math, and then I was going to do writing, and then I was going to be a computer programmer. When I graduated college, that's what I thought I was going to do. And I interviewed for those jobs because I thought that's what I wanted to be. For so many of us, see, the reason the interest, activity, passion, hierarchy is so important is because that's ever changing. I can't imagine a world where I won't be bored of what I'm doing in 6 months. And I know a lot of you feel the same way and have experienced the same thing. And the problem with that is a lot of times, like, we think there's something wrong with us because we see these career people who are able to stick with one thing for so long. And I can't imagine that would ever be my reality. And so what I want to get, okay, and now I'm going to move into the actual title of the message here, because I feel like we're kind of on the same page now. And so the first phase that every creative, successful person goes through is discovery. Discovery is the first phase. And the reason that discovery is so important is because the more you know yourself, the more deeply you know yourself, the more deeply you can impact others. And it's not any, like, woo-woo, like self-knowledge. Oh, knowing yourself is the best way to know everybody else. It's not like that. It's the fact of the matter is, anything you do in this life, for it to get momentum, for it to get anywhere beyond yourself, it has to be sustainable. In order to do anything sustainable, you have to actually like what you're doing. Right? And so discovery is the first step to that as a creative. I love Angus's thing that he shared this morning. I am a blank who does blank. What is it? I am a blank.
I'm a blank that does blank for blank so that they can blank.
I am a blank that does blank for blank so that they get blank. They get it?
Yeah.
Perfect. And that's great if you're running a business. That's what you need. You need the ideals. You need the mission statement so that you know exactly what you're about. But in the creative side, it's not so much as you're writing a mission statement or you're defining all these values. A lot of times when I say, oh, it's discovery, it's deciding who you really are and why you really are. What happens is people write down, oh, I'm a blank who does blank for blank blank. But I want to turn that inside, right? Because it's not necessarily what you do at this time, because we all know what you want to do changes. What you do changes. It's the nature of the world. But if you know yourself and the kinds of things that you like to do, and the kinds of things that you have a jump on 90% of the world because you were doing them when you were 7, those are the areas where you're going to be able to contribute the greatest value to everybody else. And so I want to share a personal story right now, and my dad's here on the front row, and I don't think he knows I'm going to tell this yet, that he's involved in this story. How many of you are homeowners or have ever owned a home in your life? Okay, so you guys know the thing that happens. And everybody else who hasn't owned a home yet, we're about to let you in on a dirty secret. Whenever you get your first home, everybody takes that opportunity to push their crap into your house. Right? Like you got people moving you're in, and all of a sudden here's your Uncle John with a 90-pound CRT television. He's like, hey, where do you want this? And you're like, is that even ours? He's like, no, I knew you needed something. So I just put it, the living room? Okay, living room is where I'll go. And then your relatives are the worst because they've known you for the longest, and your parents like have stuff from your childhood that neither of you is really emotionally connected to. But your mom feels bad throwing it out, so she's like, hey, here's your Furbies. Like, you loved these Furbies. I'm just going to leave them. Okay, bye. You don't know what to do with Furbies, so you end up with a pile of stuff in your basement. And so I had this experience. And I finally made up my mind. I was like, all right, babe, we got stuff in the basement everywhere. It's not even ours. We got to figure out what to do with it, right? So I'm downstairs in the basement, and I'm going through these boxes. And over here, I have my teddy bears, thank God. And over here, I have my plaques from when I played basketball. Most improved. I know, because I know you're looking at me like, basketball? Most approved. So I'm going through this, and I finally get to this one box, which appears to be just like a stack of paper. And I pull off the lid, and I'm sorting through this box, and what it is letters that my dad had written me from as far back as I can remember. And actually, I make fun of my mom for holding on to some of that stuff, but I'm glad she held on to this. And I'm looking back, and there are all these letters, even up to right before I went to college, she was still writing to me, saying stuff like that. And I find the one that was right before. There's a becoming a man trip in the Bryson family. Like you go fishing in Florida, and you have like the talk, but then you also have some other things that happen, and you are initiated at that point. He was writing to me from Florida at that time. And I go even further into the box, and at the very bottom of the pile, I find this old, like, crinkly, yellowed piece of paper. And I pull it out. And I read it, and it's dated 1996, which you could tell by looking at me. But I was in first grade. And Dad says on the page, he says, Todd, I'm so proud of everything that you're doing in first grade. Listen to this next part. He says, I can't wait to finish the story you're writing about the guy on an island. In first grade, I was coming up with ideas in my head and writing them down on paper. And here I am at 28, coming up with ideas in my head and writing them down on paper. See, when you sort through your past, if you can sift past the nostalgia buzz, what you really find is clues to who you could be. The better you know your past, the better you can define your future. Because the stuff you do as a kid doesn't leave you. You guys know that. Your personality, for the most part, doesn't change from year to year to year. It takes something pretty radical. Now, your beliefs change all the time because the mind is constantly seeking new information, and you're trying to find what to think about this, that, or the other. And sometimes you get entrenched in your beliefs, and sometimes you're able to make new beliefs. One of my favorite examples is there's a pair of identical twins in the early 1900s, separated at birth, but sharing, obviously, a lot of the same genes. One of them, when the 1940s roll around, goes deep into the Hitler Youth movement, a loudspeaker for that, a campaigner for that, and the other one goes absolutely the opposite direction, defending the Jewish and the minorities that were obviously under some pretty serious persecution at the time. So those are two different people, but we see the same kind of personalities attracted to the same sorts of things, the same sorts of activities. And that's kind of how your personality works. See, the thing is, whenever you get into this spot where you want to do something else in the world, you feel like you have to be a new person. You feel like you have to follow all these examples, when in reality, a lot of what you have to do is identify who you are and what you've done all along. I used to hate the idea that my destiny was already kind of programmed, or that I might become a teacher like my parents. But whenever I see the clues from my life and I start to look back and I go, okay, my dad was a writer. Like, look at all these pages I have. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. He started a business in computers which shut down because, quote unquote, we would always need people to do paperwork. A little ahead of his time. So I have all these things. It's my heritage, and I understand now that I have this thing that's been passed on from generation to generation to generation, and now it's me, and here I was treating it like it's a casual thing. Like, oh yeah, I like to write. Not really that big. It's just this thing I do, you know. And you have stuff like that too. I know you do, because I know every single human being is raised with different experiences, different beliefs. They have different genetics. They're in a different location. It's easy to think in this day of connectivity that we're not unique, when in fact you are. The only unique thing about yourself is the fact that you are you. And the more you discover that, the more you are able to touch other people. The second phase that all creative people go through is discipline. And this one sucks. This is about, discovery is nice. You're looking in your past and you're figuring out kind of who you are and what you do, and you're fully accepting yourself as a creative. The discipline part is where you got to put shoes on that work. Because the truth of the matter is, without discipline, there is no creativity. The first, and we're going to do a little exercise here, because as you can tell, I'm more of a why guy. Like, I like to talk about things, why you do what you do. But I also want you to walk out of this room with something you can do tomorrow and will be very useful. Okay? So the first idea I want to break kind of around this creative, fuzzy definition is the idea that thoughts come to you, you don't come to them. Creatives have kind of a reputation for being flaky. I don't know if you guys know this or not. You may have encountered a creative, flaky person who's like currently living in his mom's basement, like, I'm going to do so much. I'm a dreamer, right? But the thing is, that's because we all have this belief that ideas just kind of come to us. Like, we have to be inspired in order to create. And really, it's the other way around. Ideas don't come to you, you come to them. You put yourself in a position to come up with ideas every single day. So what I want you to do, we'll do a little exercise here. You guys are side A. You're all A's. Say A, so I know you're up there. All right, perfect. You guys are side B. Say A, so I know you're up here. A. That's confusing. Say B, so I know you're up here. All right. Side A, pick a partner on side B. You guys move around the room, find a partner over here, and take some new seats. This is when I move chairs if you have to, do whatever you do. Grab a partner over here.
Oh, we can I'll just sit next to you.
All right, man. We're down.
Sorry.
Oh, did you?
All right, so you've got your partners. It looks like mostly Angus needs a partner. He's too scary for everybody. All right, so what you're going to do, I need you to get a piece of paper or your phone or something to take down ideas. And what you're going to do for me is you're going to take 90 seconds to work as a team to write down all of the ways a cat is like a refrigerator. You can take that whatever direction you want. Starting now, yes. Seconds. Okay, I'm calling that time. I didn't really keep up with 30 seconds. I'm calling that good enough because we got to move. Somebody share an idea for me. How is a cat like a refrigerator?
They're both cold inside.
They're both cold inside. How many of you had they're both cold inside? That's good. What else?
They can be your best friend or your worst enemy.
They can be your best friend. Oh, I love that. Best friend or worst. All right, up here. They freeze when alarmed. Right? That's perfect. I love it. What else we got?
They can both hurt you.
They can both hurt you. Very true.
They both can be furry.
They can both be furry. Yeah.
They both might have milk in them.
They both might have milk in them. Very well done. What else we got up here? You can decorate a cat or you can decorate a refrigerator. One of them might protest a little bit. All right, and let's take two more. One back here.
They're expensive to maintain.
They're expensive to maintain.
And you have to replace them every 7 or 8 years.
And you I'm so glad that was the last one. Because that's going to be hard to beat. Okay, so what happens, and I need to hustle along here because I know we're running low on time. So what happens whenever you do a list of ideas like this is that the first few kind of come naturally. They come kind of easily. Like you get something, once you get your head around, wait, did he just use cat and refrigerator in the same sentence? Right? Once you get past that, the first few ideas become kind of easy. And then what happens is you come up with a couple of like terrible, crappy things. And it's at that point that your brain is typically tempted to stop and say, okay, we're good. But if you push through that, you get better stuff. You get the gold on the other side of the mud. Like you have to replace them every 7 to 8 years. Right? And that's part of the creative processes, right? We believe once you move beyond the idea of I just have to be inspired and to the idea of, okay, I can work my way there, it doesn't get easier, but at least you know there's something on the other side. Right? So once you push through that mud, you find more stuff. And that's the reason that I've sat here after 2 years with 470 posts, because every day come up with ideas, execute on the ideas. When I think I'm out of ideas, which is every day, I come up with more ideas, right? Because you know it's a process. You just have to get past the garbage. And the more you do it, the harder it gets. The final phase of every creative person, every successful creative person, is destiny. And now we've seen this interesting thing where at the beginning of this journey, we've been looking totally inward, completely finding ourselves and figuring out what we're about. We've taken the steps to put that into action, put that into words, put that into work, quality and quantity, amount of work. And then finally, the ironic thing is, at this point, we get to turn that completely inside out. Because the real way you make an impact on the world is to leave it on other people. Because here's the hard truth about life, about this planet. At the end of it all, the best you can hope to be is a trivia question. That's it. That's as good as it gets. That's the best of humanity. The best of everything that's existed goes down to a trivia question. And the difference between the ones who are remembered and the ones who are forgotten amongst those trivia questions is the one who are remembered left what they did in other people. What I've been saying to myself a lot recently, my kind of mantra for this to remind myself is focus on 4. focus on four people in your life who you can matter the most to, because in this day and age, we're tempted, right, to go for 400,000, 4 million. But what happens when you take that back and you look at those people closest with you? That's exactly what Joe did. He looked at who was closest to him. He looked at the 4. He looked and said, okay, what's this person's goal? How can I advance that? And you follow your interests into those areas, right? And you offer what you can uniquely offer through you as a person. And so that's how you make an impact as a creative person. Those are the 3 phases of every successful thing. And I know, actually, forget about 4. If you change 1, isn't it worth it? If you change one person who's in the realm of your influence before you get to be where you want to be, it starts with where you are. And so whenever you go from here, I need you to think of those 4 people. And if you have to start with 1, start with 1. And change those people. That's how you eventually change the world. That's my time. Thank you guys very much. I didn't really have any Q&A planned, but if you have Q's, I've got so many A's. It's ridiculous. Yeah, man.
You got a business card?
I don't have a business card, but it's toddbryson.com.
I got you on Instagram.
You got me on
I just
Instagram?
wanted one for fun.
Yeah. I can give you Ross's. Thank you, man. Yeah.